One of the best uses of Revit is to produce construction drawing style drawings from your 3D models. And let's start that process by creating a sort of construction drawing style floor plan, replete with annotation that's typical of this stage of design. And all the annotation fun begins here on the Annotate toolbar. And one of the simplest things we can do, we've actually already done a little bit of it, is adding things like dimension strings. And as we saw before, you can just click on a wall and temporary dimension strings show up. However, if you want to add more, for example, if I want to annotate where the location of these interior walls are, I have to go and use a dimension string. And you just click on a dimension string, and I usually use the aligned one because it is the most handy-dandy. And first of all, you can dimension from different parts of walls, wall center lines or wall faces. And we haven't been too picky here about indicating which walls are sort of existing, which is typically the exterior walls, and then which ones are new. But let's just pretend that these outer walls are existing walls, and this new one is a new interior partition. Well, you would measure that interior partition from its center line. That's how they lay it out. But the outer, the walls that are existing, the exterior walls, you'd measure those from the faces. And if you think about it, you can't get a tape measure on the inside of a wall that's already built. And you just click on the dimension tool and then click on the surfaces that you want to measure. Click in the middle somewhere where there's no dimension, nothing to dimension, and it should place the dimension. Now there are a couple of things about this dimension. First of all, the text is really big. Why do we want such big text? Well, we don't really want such big text, but the easiest thing to do is change the scale of the drawing. If I make this 1/4 inch, you see how the text gets smaller, and this is probably better for our project. Anyway, 1/8 inch is pretty teeny tiny. To move around the text, you use the Modify tool. Click on the dimension string, and you can drag it up or down so that it doesn't interfere with other elements in your project. And you can also move the individual pieces here. If I just click on this dot, see how it'll put a little line there. And this is great if you're running out of space and you just want to move the text. If you want to change the text, for example, this exterior dimension, we don't really know if that's what that exact dimension is. I mean, we typed it in. You can actually double-click on the dimension, the text itself, and it brings up the text field. And you can even override the text and say, well, we don't know, or something like that. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a suffix, I'll add a space first, VIF, which stands for Verify in Field. And this is very typical when you're measuring something that's existing in a project. And I'll come down, I'll do the same for this dimension. Again, just double-click on the text, and you can add in VIF. Another common thing to dimension are windows. And again, you go to the Annotate tab and click on Aligned. I'm going to click on my inner surface here. Now, windows are typically dimensioned to the center line. And one trick here is you don't actually have to dimension every single window. You can just dimension one, and because I spaced these evenly, I can double-click on the dimension string and add in the text TYP, or I could add in typical, the whole word, but I'm running out of space here. And here, I'll drag this up so that you can see it easily. And there you go. You don't have to dimension any of the others because they're already there. You would also want to dimension things like this landing, both the width and the length. And now that I think of it, this landing here is actually not the right size, is it? Because it should be 5 feet wide. You should be able to turn around. So I can just nudge this out, or I can just make this 5 feet. And there we go. Ooh, except I moved it to one side here. Let's nudge that little guy over there. I just love the nudge tool. And here's a fun trick you can do with dimension strings. If I go and I put a dimension string on this column here, which I've conveniently moved off center, I'll place the dimension string. See how it says EQ here? That stands for equal. If you just click on that, it will center the object, and you can then lock it in position. And now nobody can move my column as long as I have this dimension string in there. And you don't always want it to say equal. Sometimes you want it to actually say the dimension. But in this case, equal is fine because it indicates that it's on center. What are we to do with a spiral staircase? Well, we do want to dimension this, but it's a little harder because it is a spiral. And basically, the simplest thing we can do is measure the diameter. There's a tool for measuring the diameter, and you just click on some part of it, and then you get a symbol which indicates diameter, theta. And there you go. You've measured the diameter with the arrows. And as you might imagine, you can also just do it via a radius, or you can do an angular dimension if you want to show some smaller piece, say how wide apart these treads are. And when you are doing dimensions, one thing you'll notice is that sometimes the numbers are nice round numbers, just because of the way we laid out our plan. Sometimes they're not so nice round numbers. For example, I believe down here we had some fairly precise numbers. Well, during construction drawings, of course, you want to be as precise as possible. But at this stage of design, which is schematics, we can round the numbers up. To do that, you type in UN for units, or UN, and then you can round numbers to whatever you prefer. In this case, I believe that, let's see, we'll go with angles, and instead of 2 decimal places, we'll just round it to 0 decimal places. And then length is the one that normally 32nd of an inch is pretty optimistic, particularly at this stage of the game. I'm just going to round things to the nearest inch. Now, of course, later on, this could get me into trouble if I was doing construction drawings, but at this stage of our careers, we are not doing construction. You can also do other things like suppress the number of spaces. This is great if you're running out of space on your drawing. For example, this 10 and 5/8, there's a space before and after the dash. You can also suppress 0 feet, so if it's just inches, you can do that. But I'm gonna leave it as is and click OK, and you see how it rounds up the numbers. And you can also modify dimension strings after they're in the drawing. You can just click on them. So for example, I want to show that there's a clear dimension between these railings. That's kind of the important code distinction. Well, first of all, I can click these draggers here, these grips, to change either the length of what's called a witness line. I can also drag this dot to change the positioning. You see how it adjusts the dimension. But the other thing I can do is choose Edit Witness Line. When I do that, it will allow me to add in new subdivisions of the line. And gee, now I'm thinking I should have suppressed those zeros. But anyway, when you click outside of the dimension string or in the middle where there's nothing, you'll see how it leaves the editing mode. And then you have now demonstrated what the clear dimension is. You might want to clean it up so that you can read these. One of the nice things about construction drawings is it's great when you can actually read them. And here we go. I'll add clear to my text to make it clear. Now, one thing about floor plans is they can be quite crowded, but they're also a spot where you can convey all sorts of different kinds of information. You just have to decide what you want to show. In this case, I want my mass to show up, and I also would like some kind of indication of the carpet pattern, but I don't want to make the drawing in color. Well, to the rescue comes the Visibility and Graphic Overrides menu. If you look here, it's in your Visibility View Properties. You can also type in VG, bring up that menu. And this is great if you want to hide whole categories. For example, if I wanted to hide all the furniture and make this just a clean floor plan, I could turn off all the furniture and watch what happens. Well, I don't have a lot of furniture in here, but you see how it disappears. I think I'll leave the furniture on because I'm only going to have one floor plan, not a special furnishings plan. I'm also going to turn back on the Masses tool. See, remember I made that funny sculptural item. You can also hide other things. As for a carpet pattern, well, I'm here in hidden line view, so the carpet color won't show up. However, if I go to the materials library, find my carpet, I can make a shaded view pattern here. Remember, the Appearance tab is the rendered view. The Graphics tab is just the non-rendered views. And to add a pattern, you just click on the pattern tool, and there's a number of patterns that are sort of readily available here. I'm going to just choose one that is representative of carpet here. I'll choose sand dense. And you can create custom patterns, and you can actually have one pattern in front of another pattern. You can have two patterns. This is the surface pattern. If you cut through some object that has this material on it, this is what you'll see. So for example, if you have a wall and it's made of wood, the cut pattern is what will show up when you cut through the wall. So I'll click Apply and OK, and there is my textured floor without having to go through the color process. Just be aware that it only affects the current view. So my mezzanine, I'll have to go through the same process. The floor itself, material is already there, but I'll have to make sure that the flooring pattern is visible. And again, if you don't want the flooring pattern visible in this particular view, you can go to the Visibility and Graphic Overrides menu, and if you go down and find Flooring, which is around here somewhere, Floors, you can actually override the surface pattern. Just click on the Override button and say, nope, don't want it visible, and hit OK and Apply, and away goes your flooring pattern. I'm going to cancel because I want to see that. Walls pose a special problem because you want the Poché to match in floor plan and reflected ceiling plan and section drawings. To change the wall Poché color everywhere rather than just in the one view that we're looking at, but we really have to override all of the walls in your project. To do that, go to the Manage tab, and there's an option called Object Styles. If you remember, this is where we change the materials on our imported SketchUp objects. Well, one thing we can do here is override what all the walls look like. And this is the same look as the Visibility and Graphic Overrides menu. And you can see here there's actually several options here, including wall sweeps and common edges. But let's just change all of them. And by default, the material is something called Default Wall. And that's the way it looks in shaded view. We can click the three dots here and change the material that it is displaying as. We can display the cut pattern here as something that we prefer. I'm going to choose a solid fill and OK. And maybe let's make it a color because we can, and also because it shows up a little better on our screen. I'll choose orange. Orange is in this year. And Apply and OK. And you can see in the background here that my walls have changed color. Isn't that cool? All of them. And you should see that change reflected in all of your views. Now, you will also want to change a few other things. Columns, for example. You'll want to override what those columns look like. And same thing, you can come in here, and I could actually just choose the default wall material for the columns. And columns, for whatever reason, the line weight that they show is a little on the light side. We can make that a little darker, that cut line weight. And again, when you click Apply, you should see the line weight change. Typically, you do want those walls to have a nice dark line weight. Also, roofs and floors. Those are also going to want to be overridden. And you can do it the same way by going to the default material that's shown floors and change the Poché color. You could also make it the default material of the walls, default wall material. And you can see here it looks just fine here in plan, although you will notice that I'm not seeing any cut pattern, any Poché inside this wall. And the reason is because it's the wall seen from above. Revit does kind of display things in a funny way sometimes. These walls are below the stairs. So you can change the cut height of the wall, the floor plan, so that it shows these walls. However, it is a little weird to see them through the floor. So I'm actually going to override the graphics of these elements here. because it's a little weird to see them through the wall. And I'm just going to override the line color here. By default, it's whatever the line is for the wall, but I'm going to make the line style something different. Let's just make it dashed. We can make the color gray is actually fine. And the line weight, we can make 1, which is the lightest line weight. Typically, line weights in Revit go from 1 to about 6 for a heavy wall line. And there you can see the walls now look a little bit different. Thing we make use of in Revit are something called room tags. And the way Revit generates things like schedules, it usually does it by room. However, you have to tell it what the rooms are. You have to make room for rooms. And lo and behold, on the Architecture tab here, the Architecture ribbon, there's a room tool. If you click on it, it will define a room based on boundaries. See how it gives you a preview of what the room looks like, and then you just click once to place the room. Now, there's only one room so far in this project, and it will put a tag in when you do that. You can also have it place rooms automatically, and it'll just kind of fill your project up. Now, what if I want, say, a different definition for the room from the front and the back of the room? Maybe one is kind of more of a service area, I don't know. Well, you can draw in room separators. And normally, room separators are walls. So if I just click on this wall, you see how it's giving me that wall icon, the dashed line that indicates you're connecting to a wall. Here, and I'll draw a room separator line here from that wall, and it will actually find the wall that is underneath the stairs. So now, when I go to the Architecture tab and try to place another room, you see how it has changed the definition of this room to be just the front. And then I can click another one back here, and it'll be the back. And you can come in here, you can change the name, and I can call it something like front, because that's what I've been calling it. The other thing you can do is room tags, and this is a whole area of Revit. It has the ability to tag different items, door tags, window tags, stair tags, ceiling tags. There's a million tags in Revit, but the room tag, there's different kinds loaded in automatically. So for example, let's say I wanted to have the area. Maybe I'm doing space planning. I can just change that here. And obviously I didn't have this one selected, so I can have to change that one separately. And I can also rename this to be the back. And having rooms defined in your plan, especially in larger projects, can be nice if you're doing space planning. You can color in rooms independently. Just click on Color Fill Legend, and it's going to have a color scheme that it will apply to your project. Here, we'll put this over here. And it can color the rooms in your project in different ways. I'm going to have it color by room. Interesting enough, you can color by HVAC zone. And each room that has a different name will get a color that's unique. And you see how it's colored in my plan. It's also changed the visibility and graphic overrides so that I no longer see the Poché or the floor pattern here. And you can actually select this, and if you don't like the color scheme, you can come in. This is a little pastel for my tastes here. You can come in and choose something a little more assertive, perhaps. I don't know. And not that it's just a matter of taste. And this is looking a little garish here. But this is a great way you can imagine if you are space planning. You can create areas using just these room areas, room separators, and then you can color it in and kind of get a report of all the different floor areas. And that will get tracked as you move different parts of your project. The areas associated with it will change also, which means your room finish schedule will also change. Of course, a color-schemed space plan is not really necessary when you only really have 2 spaces. So I'm going to undo back to where I don't have that color legend anymore. That's much better. And I will add a room tag to my mezzanine. And the same problem applies if I go and create a room upstairs. It's going to fill the entire upper area with the room definition. So I do need to come in with that room separator line. And in this case, I'm just going to pick the edge of the mezzanine. And there you go. Oops, except I think I only got part of it. draw that all the way over. Draw this over, make sure it actually is separating. And now if you select the tag, you should, or the room, you should find that it is correct. Another thing to note up here on the mezzanine is that you can actually see the first floor in several ways here. You can see it here because there's no floor, it's open. But you can also see through the floor. That's a little weird. Sometimes it's handy, but sometimes it's not to see all the way through the floor. And this is what's called an underlay. And if you just go with nothing selected, go to the View Properties, you should come down in the menu here to a section called Underlay. And you can see it's showing us the ground floor. If you don't want to see the ground floor, just choose None. I will show you that the underlay has a top boundary, so it stops at the mezzanine, and you can make it look up. So if you wanted to see, for example, where the lighting was or where the ductwork was, you could have it look up and show you the ground floor reflected ceiling plan. I'm going to turn it off, see how it disappears. Also, notice how everything else disappears. So interesting enough, it will show you the stair, but it does not show you all these other elements that are here. So we do need to find some way to indicate to everyone out there in Revit land that this is open to below. And the graphic standard way to do that is to draw in basically a big X that says open to below. And for that, we'll use detail lines. And it's quite simple. You just choose detail lines. And these are very AutoCAD-y sorts of lines. And there's a number of different types of lines here. So we can choose one of these. Overhead, I believe, is a dashed line. We can try that one. And you just draw in a big X. Hit Escape to stop drawing. And then draw another big X here. I'm just going to draw it to the edge of the stairs so it's not too confusing. And then you put in the text open to below. And to put in text, we use the text tool. I know that's a shock. The text tool is super easy. You just click and drag a box to create the text and write what you want below. It will stretch the box when you're done. You can also control the centering, left or right justified. You can also control the size of the text in the note. So typically, a set of construction drawings, the text isn't all that big. You can see how this is much larger than this text. So let's make this 3/32 of an inch Arial. And that's much more reasonable. And while we're sitting here looking at it, you don't typically show symbols like this multiple places. You try to show them in just one place. The main floor plan is most typical. So I'm going to hide this in my current view so that I don't see it. And there you go. It's a lot clearer where we are cutting, what's open and what's not open. And notes are a great way when your drawing is not entirely clear what's going on. You can just add in notes to help explain things. For example, if I click the text tool, right now it's set over here to just show me text. However, I can add a leader line, and that leader line can have one segment, it can have two segments, and it can be curvy if you're just feeling like you really want to have a great day. And the curvy one, you can see here, it kind of auto-generates the curve based on where you place the text, and I can add in some information that may not be entirely clear just from the drawing. And once it's in here, here's a position changer, and I can click and drag that, it'll move it. I can also rotate the text for some unknown reason. And I can also change the location of the arrow, which is super handy. Sometimes things tend to overlap, and you need to move either the head or the arc of the arrow. Finally, we can change the type of text it is back down to 3/32 of an inch. Oh, except it didn't change. Now it changed. Much better. You can also add and subtract arrows, and it will add the same type of arrow. See how I'm just clicking the plus sign here? It will add a leader, either the left or the right. I can also remove the last one that was there, and I can point to another arc. So you can have multiple arrows, and sometimes people will have arrows that's for the open to below area rather than the big X. That's just another graphic way of doing it. And I should probably have a note over here that says this is totally a fail for stairs, because if you look at it, this is the landing for the stairs, and you kind of have to shimmy past this opening in order to get to the stairs. Maybe I could make this opening a little bigger to be more realistic. Let's put the finishing touches on our floor plan here. A couple of things that are nice to have: a graphic scale, and good old Autodesk has one that we can load from the Autodesk website. And you can just come in here and choose graphic scale. You should find one. Here we go, 1/4 inch. That's the scale of our drawing. So you just click on it and load it into the project. And you might say, wait a second, where is it? Why don't I see something that allows me to insert it? And that is because it is a symbol. So you have to go to the Annotate tab. It's not a regular component, it's a symbol component. Some things are that way, symbolic that way. And typically it goes on the lower right of your floor plan. You can see here, it doesn't actually say graphic scale. Maybe we should put some text that says that. Now, I also like to have a north arrow. And a north arrow, there aren't really any nice ones in the Revit library. However, I can use AutoCAD. I remember good old AutoCAD. And AutoCAD, because it is a much older program, you're going to find a lot more legacy components, blocks in AutoCAD speak. And here I have a document which I have collected my favorite north arrows. And you can basically pick one that you like. And if you have it on its own, then you can just import that as its own AutoCAD file. You can also W-block, W-B-L-O-C-K, out the file that you want. Just choose which object, or you can just pick the objects if they're not in a block already. So just choose the object you want and save it onto your computer. And that can be brought into Revit quite easily. And as we did before, you just basically link CAD. You can also import it, which kind of does not have a link on it. You can see here I've got it labeled my favorite. The other thing, when you bring in drawings from AutoCAD, Revit will look at the original colors of the layers. You don't generally want that. You don't really want to see the original colors. The other thing is that, like SketchUp objects, you probably want to go manual center. Now, when you W block it out, the origin should be right in the center of the object, but just to be sure, I would make sure you go manual rather than auto. Click OK, and the object should be connected to your cursor. And click once to place it. You see my origin was actually off. But also, it's really tiny. Oh, it's so cute. And the reason is because it's probably like 2 inches in the original AutoCAD file. You can, with it selected, go onto the Modify tool. You see how it actually says north facing arrow or north arrow. And then you can use your editing tools. I can just scale it. When you scale, you click one point to provide a base point, another point for as a kind of reference line. And then as you move your cursor out, you can see it will resize the object based on your clicking. And there you go, you have a nice north arrow. Again, typically these show up only on the main floor plan, the graphic scale and the north arrow, particularly the north arrow. The graphic scale shows up anywhere you have drawings that are to scale, and so you don't have to put it here in the plan. You can also put it on the sheet if you would rather. You also don't typically show a lot of site information on your floor plans. So there's a couple ways that you can kind of modify this. You could obviously just select some objects and hide them, right? I can just right-click on these and choose Hide Elements in View, and they disappear like magic. Some things, like these reference planes, I actually can hide them using the visibility and graphic overrides. But I think I'm just going to right-click on one of them and then choose Hide the Category. And that will hide all the reference planes. You do want to make sure that you want to do that, that you don't have some reference planes that you need. Typically, these don't print anyway. So, and I'm going to hide these guys as well. Let's hide this guy. And there we go. Now, the last thing is these exterior elevation symbols. These should come a little closer to the floor plan. And that way they kind of show up. And I'm gonna pull them in pretty close so that they don't waste too much space on my sheet. And like we saw with the interior elevations, moving these elevations does not always change the kind of crop boundary. For that, we'll have to look at the actual exterior elevations and make sure they're showing everything that we want to see. And again, you can nudge these guys in. I'll nudge these in, pull this dimension string in because it doesn't need to be quite so far away. You also want to check the crop region. I'm going to show the crop region. And the reason is when you drag in a plan onto a sheet, which we'll do next, the crop region actually defines how big the drawing is going to be on your sheet of drawings. And really, we only want it to show this area here. We don't want it to show the rest of the model. And in fact, I could have, rather than hiding some of these elements, I could have used the crop region to kind of crop them away. But either way works, and I didn't want to see parts of them. So, but I also don't want to see the crop region when I print. Not this case, anyway. So you can just choose the option to hide the crop region. Make sure that the crop view option is selected. If you remember, this is the thing that actually crops away parts of the drawing. We do want that. We just don't want to see the actual region itself. And there is my beautiful floor plan. You'll want to do this in all of your drawings, by the way. Section drawings, the mezzanine drawing, crop away, turn on the crop region, and make sure that it's cropping what you want to see. You should also note that some things show up on all sheets. For example, section marks, indicators, those show up on all of your plans and also your section views. The other sections should show up. But not those interior elevation markers and not the exterior elevation markers. Those only show up on the level on which they are created. Creating a sheet of drawings is pretty simple because there's a button that says Sheet, and you click on that, and like magic, it's going to create a new sheet. Now, it only has one title block, so let's go with that one for the moment. And you see it creates a blank sheet here. And I actually don't like this title block. This is a little big. We usually use a 24 by 36 sheet. So I can go to the Insert menu, to the Autodesk Family page, and I can look for some sheets here. And you'll find here in the menu there's a whole section of title blocks. We can load in more than one. I'm going to load in the one that says 22 by 34. And choose Load. And what's nice is now it's a family loaded into our project, so I can select a family I don't want, and I can choose the other size. And you see how it gets a little smaller. And basically this is very much like AutoCAD Paperspace. It's a big sheet of paper. The boundaries of the paper are defined by your title block. So when you go to print, it says, oh, you have a title block this big. That's how big I'm going to make the sheet. And to get drawings into this sheet, or onto this sheet, you just click and drag them in from your project browser. See, when you do that, I have a little preview of the size of the plan. This is going to be based on the crop region. Remember, we cropped our crop region. And I can drag in the mezzanine as well. The other thing is, as you drag it in, you see how I get that dashed blue line? That is indicating alignment. So when I click on that dashed green line, it aligns the plans, which is really awesome. If I happen to drag them out of alignment, you can just drag them back into alignment. It usually works, not always, but it usually does. The other thing that you want to do, you can lay out your sheets in any which way you want. The old-fashioned way is right to left. And you see how it's labeled this one 1 and this one 2? By all means, you can go left to right. I think that's an old-school methodology here. The other thing is, it's a little confusing how it works. If I want to move this title block here, the title for the drawing, I have to click on it directly. So same with this one. If I want them to move, I have to click on it directly. You see how I can get a dashed line indicating alignment. However, if I want to make it a shorter line, I have to click in the middle of the view that it is referencing, and now I can shorten that line right up. You can also control some of the view properties here. If you just select the view, you can control its scale, the display level, whether or not it's coarse or not. And you can also double-click inside the view, and this is, again, kind of like AutoCAD, like a viewport, and you can control things like the crop region visibility. Just double-click outside of it to exit, and now I can see the crop region. Now, of course, I don't really want to see the crop region. I just wanted to show you that you could do that. But you can make changes. You can make editorial changes in this view very easily this way. And I find that as I am laying out the sheet, I will often see things that I missed when I was zoomed way in on the plan, and this is your big chance to try to change those. So let's talk a little bit about the title block. Well, what's interesting about Revit is there are some parameters that are associated with this title block that will change only on this sheet. So if I, for example, click on the number, I can change this to A 1.1. It changes here. It will not change any of the other sheets. The same with the author and the checker. I can put in my name, and I'll do that, my name. And I can put in my boss's name here, and it will only change this sheet. However, if I change the issue date, which I can make today, or I suppose I could probably make it a real number, a real date, it will change on all sheets. Same with the project number. If I label this Project 1, all my sheets will now say Project 1. If I give it a name, and I'll call this Existing Building, it will change on all the sheets. I can change these other parameters. One thing you can't change is this 1/4 inch scale. It is looking at the drawings on your sheet, and it fills that in for you. So Revit's pretty smart. Now, one thing that Revit wants to do is advertise itself, and you can see here the good folks at Autodesk have put in their names at the top of your project. We don't want that. So this title block is just a component like others that we have seen. We can load in other components. We can also double click on this and edit it, and let's get rid of this little advertisement for Autodesk. We can also change the dimension of this sheet. It's kind of old school to leave a full 1/2 inch all the way around your drawing. I can make this just a little bit bigger by nudging these lines up a little bit, nudge these lines down, and I can nudge these lines over a little, just to give me a little bit more square footage there for my project. I can also, if I want, put things like the name of the project here. This is a common thing when you roll up a set of drawings. I'm going to remove all the consultants and the addresses here, but I'm going to put in the name of the project vertically. In fact, I'm going to get rid of these revisions because we're never going to make any mistakes, so we don't need any revisions. And you can totally make this title block your own. You don't have to use the standard one. The only thing that you do have to follow, the rules that you have to follow, is that the sheet should be, sheet name should be here, and the information about the project should be in the lower right. And typically you do have the name of the project vertically. So I'm going to take the project name here, this symbol, and there's something special about this text. This isn't just text. It's actually what's called a label. And what a label does is it makes reference to some parameter that's in your project. And normally in Revit models, you're going to find just a few sizes of text. And I'm going to make this just a hair bigger, maybe 3/8 size. So I'm going to duplicate the text, and I'll call it 3/8 of an inch, because that's bigger, right? And okay, oh, 3/8 is already in use. I guess it's already there. So the typical text has a transparent background. It's typically black. And we can choose which text we want to modify. So like 3/8 is probably better for this text because it's really big. And then you can choose a font. So we love choosing fonts, don't we? So I can go and choose whatever my favorite is. Mine I like Century Gothic. And apply and OK. And now you can see you have a nice stylistic option here. Notice that these don't change to the new font. So if you, this is the 1/4" label, you'd have to go back and change these from Arial to Century Gothic in order for everything to match. And everything should match. Nothing is worse than having 100 different fonts in your project. So click Apply and OK. And you can see they all change. Lastly, you can make this title block your own by putting in something like an image in the upper right corner. If you have a personal icon, you can do that. But you can also choose the Insert menu and import an image. And you can see that looks much better. And because this is just a family, like we normally see, we do want to save it first onto our computer. Just Control S to save. Make sure you call it your new title block rather than this name that is here. So I'll call this Brody for money. And load it into the project. And I'm just going to close it. And once it's loaded in, you can select your title block and just switch it to the new one. And there you go. There's your beautiful title block. Gosh, that was so fun. Let's create a couple more sheets while we're at it. And if you look in your project browser, sheets which are already, or views which are already on sheets have a little blue highlight on them. Let's make a ceiling plan sheet. And I'm going to scroll down in this list here, and you will see a list of sheets. And here's my A1.1 existing building. And actually, I think I'm going to make this A2.1. That's going to be my numbering scheme. So let me just come in here and change number. And when you do that, here in the Sheets menu, you can actually just right-click on this and choose New Sheet. And it even has your custom title block, or my custom title block, in here now that we've loaded it in. Click OK. And look what it does. It numbers it sequentially. It actually says, hey, you seem to want to make this the next one up in your list, but I think I'm going to go with actually 3.1 for reflected ceiling plans. And actually, I haven't even named my sheet yet. I'm going to call this RCPs. I could call it reflected ceiling plans, but that's just a lot of typing. And we can create this drawing just the way we did the other one. Just go up in your project browser, drag in the reflected ceiling plan views. You can see I have not done anything with the crop region here in either of these, so it's going to be kind of a mess. I also haven't changed the scale, but I do want to show you that you can select more than one view here. See how I've used Control to select these. You could also use a crossing window to select them. And I can change their scale all in one fell swoop. And apply. And now they've, of course, gotten big. So I will need to go and double-click inside these, crop away all the stuff that I don't want to see. I don't want to see those elevation symbols and any of that. So let's neaten this up real quickly. One tricky thing with reflected ceiling plans is you can see here that I can see the windows just fine. However, I can't see the doors. And the reason for this is the height at which this cut is created. If I click on the view itself, the view properties will pop up in my properties menu. And let me make sure I got it. And you should see an option here kind of towards the bottom that says view range. And I can edit that. And normally the view range has a top level. So that's the level that you're cutting at. So we only see things below the mezzanine. And then the depth of the cut is down to the level above because we're looking up. Now, it cuts at 7'6", and we don't want it to cut at 7'6". That's above the door. If we make that 5'6", you see how my doors now show up. And I can hit apply and OK. And the other thing is I don't actually want to see the door. One of the quirks of the way it shows reflected ceiling plan is that you don't show the doors. So I can go into my visibility and graphic overrides menu, and under doors, I don't want to hide them totally. I just want to hide the panel and the panel swing. Okay. And I don't see some of these others. You can see here when I do that, when I hit OK out through the menu, there are my door heads, and now I know where to place things like exit signs. You'll also notice it only operated on the main floor plan because I didn't have the view open here in this mezzanine level, and that's okay because I don't have any doors up there to worry about. One thing we haven't talked about yet is lighting. And lighting basically are components that you can load in from the Autodesk library. I've loaded a bunch, including one called a troffer, which is something you typically see in a gridded ceiling. And there are all sorts of rules of thumb for how to place these troffers, but the one big rule is always put it on the grid. And actually, I think I'm going to move the grid just a little bit. I'm going to select one grid line and move it over. And you see how the lights actually move with it, which is awfully handy. And then you can select more than one light. You can actually make an array, make multiple copies. I'll just do it by copy, I think. And the advantage of having the grid line is that you can use the grid lines to make easy copies. Now, this is probably a lot of lights and not exactly the high-end look that I was hoping for, but it does demonstrate how these work. And this isn't the only type of light here. I'll go over to the main floor here, and I can add in, I think I have a pendant-mounted one that I downloaded. And typically, lights go into the ceiling. Let's see here, pendant lighting fixture. There we go. 1x4. And you go and click to place it. Some lighting just actually goes onto the floor. So if you look up here in the upper right, it will tell you where it thinks it's going. In this case, it thinks it's going on the work plane, which happens to be the ceiling plan. So I'm not sure where it's going to go. So I'm going to tell it to place on face. And you see how it highlights this ceiling? And now I can get my lighting in here. Not exactly the most interesting thing, but that's hanging down. And you can also go and choose downlights, which are much more common. Again, just go to Component and Downlights. And they just look like little circles in the ceiling. Typically, you do have a reflected ceiling plan key in your projects. Now, that's a little more tricky. And to create it, I'm actually going to copy one of our reflected ceiling plan views. And you might say, how can you do that? I'm going to just right-click on the ground floor reflected ceiling plan and duplicate the view with detailing so it has all the bits and pieces with it. And I'll call this RCP Legend. So I'll just change the name here. And on this legend, let me turn on my crop region and or make it crop and turn it on so it's visible. And I'm going to move it over here, and I'm going to make a little piece of ceiling and put all my symbols on that. And there you go. I'll have myself a legend. So go to Architecture, Ceiling. I'll sketch the ceiling. And let's just choose a generic ceiling. I don't really actually care too much what it looks like. I'll just draw a boundary. But this new ceiling, the advantage of it is that I can now place all of these components. I'll just create another one, put it in here, create another one of these guys, and put it in here. And I can pretty quickly generate a legend with all of my light fixtures. I could even put in little pieces of ceiling grid that would represent my ceiling plan. And you can see here, I very quickly whipped this up. I've actually used the ceiling boundary itself as a box to bound the reflected ceiling plan legend. I draw on some text for the title. All the symbols typically line up along their center lines, so I can use the Align tool to accomplish that. And then you give each a name, which is usually the name of the component. Now, one thing is the line work, I'd like it to have a nice heavy boundary line. There is a special tool that allows you to do that. If you go to the Modify tab, there's a line work tool. And this is great when sometimes you can't hide a line that you want to hide, or you want to show a line that is hidden. Click the line work tool. And normally objects are shown by category, but I could make this boundary a wide line by just moving over it. And now when I click on it, you'll see that the lines are nice and heavy. And the ceiling boundaries, I can just change the type of line if I want those to be a wider line or a lighter line, just by changing them here. And let's say I want these lines to disappear. I can use that same line work tool. There is a line type called invisible lines. And when I do that, look at that, the lines disappear and it ends up kind of just looking like a grid. And to complete this legendary drawing, I'm going to use my crop region, and I'll first of all activate it so it crops away the rest of the model, and then I'll just drag it so that all I see is this RCP legend. And you can see I haven't changed anything in the actual base model. The only trick is if you do have a lighting schedule, you want to make sure that these guys do not show up in the lighting schedule. It's a little tricky. Anyway, I'll just hide my RCP legend and drag this onto my reflected ceiling plan sheet. There are a few things to be aware of as you create other sheets. For example, exterior elevations. You can see I have these already in my project, and they're already labeled. But I want them all to be 1/4 inch scale. Well, I can actually select all 4 and change their scale all at once just by clicking here. Kind of a convenience method. You see, nothing looks all that different. When I go to take a look at the sections, we have that same issue with the crop region. You'll want to make sure, first of all, that the view is being cropped and that you show that crop region. And we're showing a lot of outer space here. We can just come in and crop down the model ever so slightly. In this case, we do want to show the street a little bit, but I think my strange construction in the back will just crop that right away. And as we did before, we don't need quite so much ground. We can crop this all away and then hide the crop region so that we don't see it. Other things like the reference planes, you do want to hide these guys, but the levels do typically show up on your exterior model. Finally, for exterior elevations, I do think they look a lot better. This isn't the most exciting elevation, but it could use some line work, and 3 different line weights is kind of the gold standard. I can use the line work tool for parts of the building. For example, if I want really heavy lines around the outside of the building, which is kind of typical, I can come in and make these a wide line here. But what you'll find is that the little bits and pieces are a little harder to change. And then some lines, like these exterior wall lines, they actually go underground. So I don't want to show that line. To make those a heavy line, you're actually just going to have to go to the Annotate tab and Detail Line and just draw in the line the old-fashioned way by clicking on a point and drawing it all the way up. And having that heavy outline, it just makes the drawing read a little bit better. Wouldn't worry too much about all the little ins and outs, but that should make it look really sharp. One easy one to change, however, is the topo surface here. I can just go to the visibility and graphic overrides, scroll down to the topo surface, which should be down here, topography, and you can control the weight of the cut line. You see here under the category of cut, because we're cutting through the ground, I can just override it. And I always like to have a really heavy line down at the ground. I think this line weight's probably about a 6. I'm going to go with 10. What does that correspond to? I don't really know there's probably some millimeter size. And in fact, in your project, you can control line weights. If you wanted to say create a new line type, you can actually do that here under the Manage tab. There are all sorts of line patterns that you can create, and you can assign line weights in a much more specific manner than we've been doing up until now. You just go to Line Patterns. Here you can choose different ones. You can load them in from the internet, but under Line Styles, here we go at the top. You'll see if you click the little plus sign, there's a whole bunch of line styles already in your model. And you can make a new one and define it any which way you want. You could make it the site line. You should also have both transverse and longitudinal sections in your project. Now, longitudinal usually goes the long way. That's the long part of longitudinal. We can select that section and choose Create Similar. We can also go to the View tab, and there's the Section tool. And you just click once to start and once to finish. Your section tool will create the drawing for you. And like we saw before, there's this crop region. We don't need to see all this stuff in the background, but we do need to see the width of the building. And that section will show up, that section symbol will show up both in floor plan and it will show up in your other section view. And here it is. You can see the longitudinal section symbol here in this view. One fun thing, when you change the crop region, see how it moves the level indicators for you. Also, you don't want to show too much dirt, but you don't want to show too little dirt. So make sure you use your crop region appropriately and then hide it when you're done. And you know, I have a lot of windows open here. One thing you can do to make your life a little clearer is you can click this little Close Inactive Views button. And that just closes them all and kind of cleans up your screen and makes sure that you don't have anything open you shouldn't have open. The other thing is I want to draw the interior elevation that is not seen. This view, this section is looking north. I want to do the one that's facing south. So if you click on the center of your elevation symbol, the way that you draw the other one is just click the show arrow and it draws that interior elevation. And you'll find that in your project browser. If you go to interior elevations, here are the two elevations, and you can label them north, south, and east, west interior elevations for clarity. Also, I'm not a big fan of actually seeing the names on the plan. It's a little busy. I mean, they already show up on the sheets. So you can select that symbol, and you hit Tab if you can't get it directly. Choose Edit Type, and here on the elevation tag, it uses a half-inch circle. If you click the little three dots, it tells you what the nested symbol is that's being used. It's an elevation mark with a filled arrow and the view name. You can just tell it use the same symbol but without the view name, and apply and OK and cascade down through the menus, and like magic those names disappear. Also, as I add these onto the sheet, you should see these numbers all fill out automatically. Setting up all of my sheets for the different types of drawings, trying to get them to scale to fit on the sheets. And usually that works pretty well. Now, the one time it's not easy to scale a drawing is on the title sheet, where it's nice to have a couple of perspective views. Perspective views are sized differently. Of course, they're not to scale. So I'm going to double click on one of these views here and select the crop region. That's how you size a perspective view. You select the crop region. Up here, there's an option for size crop, and you can change the width. And this is a pretty big sheet, so let's make this pretty big. Just remember, when you change the size, you don't want to mess up your perspective, so you should lock the proportions here. What that does is if I change this number, say make it 16 inches, the height will change proportionally to maintain the view that we had. You hit Apply and OK, and suddenly my perspective has gotten much larger, much broader, I suppose, and I can move the object into place. And of course, the title block should go in the lower right. The other thing I'd recommend with perspectives is, just like we did with interior elevations, they usually look better when they are black and white if they have a border. So just right-click on the crop region, override the graphics in view, like we've done before, and make the line weight a nice heavy line weight. Let's go with 8 and make sure it's black. And that should give you a nice border on your title sheet around your image. Do the same for the other image as well. And usually on your title sheet, shaded or the shaded with ambient lighting usually looks pretty nice. The last thing you'll want to add to your title sheet is a list of drawings. Fortunately, that's easy to do. It's a type of view of your model called a schedule. This is on the View tabs. If you click the little down arrow, you'll see there's a number of different kinds, including things we'll find useful later when we get deeper into construction drawings. Right now, all we need is a sheet list. I'll choose that, and what it does is it looks at all the sheets in your drawings, and it is able to generate a chart with information from those sheets. And the simplest thing here that we want is the sheet number and the sheet name. Just select it in the list of available fields over here, and then click the move over the add parameter. And what it will do is it will add that parameter to your schedule. And I can even put drawn by and designed by. Now, of course, It's all by me, so I don't need to do all that. The columns here can be filtered in any number of ways, but simplest is just by the sheet number, and ascending is the good default. You can also change some of the formatting, including the orientation of the titles, and there's even a way to change the font. But let's click OK, and here's the schedule. And the schedule is like any other view. You can drag it onto your title sheet. Just drag it here under the schedules grouping in your project browser. Just drag it onto your sheet like you normally do. The one peculiar thing is that it has these grips here which allow you to stretch out the length of the sheet's names so that you can read it properly. Exporting a multi-page PDF is similar to what we've done in the past. The only difference is now, instead of the current window, we're going to select sheets and views. And if you click the little pencil button, you can bring up a list of all the different things in your project. And for us, we're just going to choose sheets. You see how I can filter this to have all my sheets visible. I can select them all. Then click Select to get back to the menu. And you can also change the settings here so that it does say combine selected views and sheets into a single PDF, which we want. And we can also call it something like our construction documents. And the other thing is we need to change the page size. So normally it has been trying to fit to page. We don't want that anymore. Now we actually want to use the official architectural size, which is ArchD 24 by 36, and zoom to 100%. If we don't do this, it's going to scale the drawing and it could be slightly off. We also do want to center the drawing on the sheet, and that'll give us a nice even border all the way out. Finally, we can tell this to print any things that are in color, which I think is probably only the picture. We can print that in grayscale because we are going to be printing these in black and white. The last thing is down here, the crop boundaries. Remember, we went through some effort to make those a heavier line weight. We want those to print. We don't want to hide those. It will hide other things, including reference planes, automatically. And again, you can unhide the reference planes by unchecking that button. But we're going to leave them hidden for now. Click Export, and there you go. It will ask you if you want to save these settings for use in a future Revit session, and sure, why not? You can call it PDF export settings, for sheets. And there you go. You'll be able to call this up next time you want to have a set of drawings. We are going to be printing these on a laser printer, which does not have a lot of memory. So remember to open your PDF file in Photoshop. You'll have to do it page by page and flatten the drawing so that it doesn't use up all the bandwidth on our campus to print every page.